Here's an example of how slow motion is used in modern action storytelling. And here's an example of the same type of action shot at standard speed. Despite the exciting choreography, slow motion inarguably makes the sequence more dramatic. It's the most widely used technique in a contemporary director's arsenal. It creates an instant sense of importance in the mind of the viewer, and yet, it's so omnipresent in big-budget action movies it's almost lost all its potency. Despite being more popular than ever, is slow motion dead?
I wish there was like footage of us walking out of the mall in slow motion, fire behind us. It's like heroes.
Katie, that would be a waste of time and absolutely unnecessary.
If you're into deep dives like this one, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Nerdstalgic so you can keep up with all our latest releases. In the early days of the invention of filmmaking, it was discovered that 24 still images shot in rapid succession could trick the eye into perceiving these separate images as a singular, constantly moving picture, a motion picture. The primary reason for this is that our brains can only process images so quickly as disparate and separate entities before it blurs into a single combined visual. This phenomenon is called persistence of vision. Essentially, everything about the filmmaking process and industry revolve around this core principle. As such, in the beginning stages of the filmmaking world, various artists and would-be industry types were experimenting with what would happen to the image when you overcranked the film running through the camera or undercranked it, meaning running film faster or slower through the exposure or projection process. Most of the original motion picture cameras had literal hand-cranking devices. The original version of what we think of today as slow motion was invented by overcranking film through a camera by the Austrian physicist and priest August Musker. He first got the idea to experiment with projection speeds when he was going to the movies, and as the film wore on, the projectionist would get tired, and the projection speed would slow, making the film jittery and hard to discern. As hard as it is to imagine, the projection was also hand-cranked. Thus, Musker decided to try and record more frames per second, thus solving this problem. However, instead, he accidentally created what we now call slow motion. He created a mechanism where the more frames shot per second, the slower the time is represented on film.
What's happening? It's slow motion.
From here, the use of slow motion becomes exponentially more common. Filmmakers such as Sergei Eisenstein and Akira Kurosawa both use the slowing down and speeding up of time in their movies, such as Battleship Potemkin and Seven Samurai, to achieve emotional effects on the audience. To say nothing of the effects of how slow motion was utilized throughout many 1950s and 60s monster movies to make scale models and actors wearing suits feel like massive creatures from beyond our earthly comprehension. As the gritty aesthetic of the 1970s took over, thanks to the new Hollywood movement, slow motion somewhat fell out of favor.
I'm gonna execute a button hook pattern super slow-mo.
However, by the end of the next decade, it would be back with a gusto thanks largely to one filmmaker in Hong Kong, John Woo. Because of his films A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, and Hard Boiled, slow motion's use was cemented in the minds of global audiences everywhere. Woo would transition into Hollywood blockbusters, but it would be his influence on a generation of other directors with his original Hong Kong films that would truly leave a lasting impact.
Buenos dias, children!
Take, for instance, the way Woo directs the climactic battle in The Killer, or the warehouse shootout in Hard Boiled, or, of course, his love of slow motion coupled with shots of doves flying through the air. It would be Woo's dominance over the 1990s that would almost single-handedly revitalize the use of slow motion. However, it would be the next two culprits that would fully transform the visual language of film forever.
Dodge this.
1999 saw the release of The Matrix, a genre-bending sci-fi epic that took elements of cyberpunk, anime, and John Woo's love of slow motion, mixed them all together, and propelled the medium of film into the 21st century. You remember this shot, right? The shot that changed movies forever? Well, originally, the film's directors, the Wachowskis, were debating strapping a camera that shot hundreds of frames per second to a rocket in order to capture the feeling of being freed from space and time. But that didn't work.
What we really like about slow motion is that it sort of brings some of that quality to action scenes.
So what they did, thanks to the involvement of a technical genius named John Gaeta, was they synchronized hundreds of still image cameras together with a computer, thus allowing each camera to capture a single moment, and when connected together, presto changeo, persistence of vision takes over, and you have rapid movement through space, with a little digital augmentation and cutting-edge green screen technology added for good measure. This moment was a massive turning point because it wasn't just artifice for artifice's sake. The visual effect was integrated into the film's story, making it that much more important. Neo is realizing he's meant for something more, and that the Matrix can be bent and warped. This triggers the bullet time mechanic. It's not just a cool effect, it's something linked directly to the plot and the characters. It's a character making a choice that warps the visual language of the story. It's the logical evolution of John Woo's love of warping time to showcase how cool and impenetrable Chow Yun-fat is. After The Matrix's release, slow motion became near omnipresent. You practically can't watch a big-budget movie without some version of slow motion and bullet time creeping in. Perfect example, the biggest and most popular movies on Earth. It's used practically throughout the entire MCU, climaxing with the Avengers films. They all have numerous examples of slow motion. Or perhaps the currently reigning king of slow-mo, Zack Snyder. From Dawn of the Dead to 300 to Watchmen, all the way through the remade Justice League, Zack Snyder has taken the idea of slowed-down balletic hyper-violence and milked it for every dime it was worth. The Zack Snyder cut was a runtime of 4 hours and 2 minutes. How much of that do you think is just the slow motion? Tragically, it's only 24 minutes. IGN did the math, but even so, 24 minutes of slow motion, whereas most films only have mere minutes. Is Zack Snyder a man who has the ability to create iconic and indelible images? Yes, absolutely, but also, maybe let's not make a movie with 24 minutes of slow motion in it.
It's like I've been in a dream where I was somehow really invested in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League.
Going to the movies has gotten more expensive. The types of movies that get made have been shrinking, and the only solution that these studios and filmmakers have is to just try more of the same and pray it works out. The last 4 DC movies have all bombed, and the public opinion on the MCU is souring. Could this be in part due to the fact that there's no diversity in what's being made these days? Sure, but there's also the simple fact that the way these films are shot is all extremely similar. You know what movie had zero gratuitous speed-ramped pseudo-bullet time slow motion in it? Barbie. It has a visual identity all its own. And when one of these IP movies isn't shot like that, it's the highest-grossing movie in Warner Brothers history. Slow motion is a tool. It's perfectly acceptable when used in an interesting, original way. However, for the past 2 decades, it's basically been being used the exact same way, to mimic the Matrix, to slow down and expand time to attempt to place dramatic importance on a moment when a character is doing something cool. We've been there, done that. Slow motion is dead. And well, that's all we have this week. What do you think? Is slow motion dead? Let us know down in the comments below, and as always, please like, comment, and subscribe to Nerdstalgic for more videos just like this.